Hello, namaste. This is Tim Halloran. I'm an astrologer here in Savannah, Georgia. This is a weekly astrological forecast. I put these videos on YouTube once a week, and you can help support future videos by purchasing a reading from me at the link below. It's Tuesday, the 27th of January. We're into our final week of the first month of 2015. Yesterday we had our half moon in Taurus, and all this week the moon is going to be waxing into the full moon in Leo that we have next Tuesday. And the theme that I do see going on this week is it's kind of like this spring that can keep getting more and more loaded, tighter and tighter. And then there can also be this spontaneous unraveling that comes towards this weekend. Yeah, so what we're talking about is the moon goes into Gemini tomorrow, and retrograde Mercury passes by the sun on Friday with the moon still in Gemini. This is an awful lot of mental energy. And there is a tremendous amount of potential for these messages to be delivering very revolutionary, revealing stories that are going to be very relevant to us. You know, all month we've been talking about the theme of it being necessary to have the mind and our emotions married in holy matrimony. And this week in particular, I see this being as extremely crucial and necessary, because we have this very mental, Aquarius, far out energy that's happening, you know, and simultaneously this weekend we have a forming Pisces party. And what's going on is today Venus entered Pisces. Mars is already in Pisces. On Saturday, Mars will conjunct Chiron, and Sunday, Venus will conjunct Neptune. All right, so we're dealing with Aquarius and Pisces energy, this very far out, existential, spiritual, yeah? And Aquarius can be this kind of topographical mapping, and with Mercury going retrograde, we're doing some very clean looks into the past. We're reviewing, we're repeating old things, as we talked about last week. Many people experience the theme of having to go back and repeat things that is typical of a Mercury retrograde. Now Mercury's kind of picking up speed, so hopefully the technological breakdowns will be a little bit calmer these next 2 weeks. However, this is leading us into the Pisces party, and this Saturday, very early in the morning, the moon moves into Cancer, so it's a very watery weekend. And you know, the recommendation that I would sort of like to give, but I'm not going to, would be, you know, kind of make sure that we get all the practical, technical things done during the week so we have time to process our emotions, to go deep and kind of be calm and relaxed this weekend. However, I don't want to give that so bluntly and directly, because that can put some pressure on us that, oh, well, Tim said it's going to be, you know, a processing week and I need to get this work done this week. And with retrograde Mercury combust the sun this Friday, moon in Gemini the next 3 days, I mean, there is so much going on. It is so busy. We're getting so many emails about things that people forgot and now we're remembering and all these things. If we try to overload ourselves, this mental overload can easily turn into a mental breakdown that will take us into the watery weekend, and then we're all going to be, you know, really what this is, you know, if you ever experienced an overstimulated nervous system, if your nervous system's ever been fried, if you've ever had too much coffee, you know, it just feels like you're kind of dead and you're just laying there. So we do have to kind of watch out for that from the, you know, mundane point of view, interacting in work, what we're actually planning out. You know, we do have to be careful to slow down to make sure that we're not overstimulating ourselves, yeah? So my recommendation to all air signs this year really is to kind of watch on the caffeine consumption. You know, we already have more so overstimulated nervous systems and we don't need to push that. So it's like if we have so much stuff we need to do and we think we're going to accomplish that by drinking more coffee, that does not work. Particularly when we're dealing simultaneously with very, very deep things that are going on. This is not just about all the little mundane things that are going on. However, I do want to call our attention to our minds, and we're going to talk about the divine masculine and the feminine, and how the divine masculine has been wounded, yeah? In these videos, I'm always talking about the wounded, suppressed femininity, and how the old age patriarchy dominated over femininity, but in fact, the masculine and the feminine have been wounded. When we're talking about the patriarchy, we're not talking about the divine feminine. We're talking about tyrants that were men that decided that men were superior. That's not real masculinity, okay? But you know, the reason I bring this up is the mind gets associated with the divine masculine, and we need to love our minds, you know? Speaking of nervous systems and needing to take care of them, we need to take care of our egos, we need to take care of our minds. I'm getting really tired of seeing the old age approach to becoming spiritual enlightened by killing off your ego and your mind. Not only is that not going to solve your problems, it's going to make you suffer more. Yeah, this does not calm down your experience by trying to kill off your mind. Your mind is a messenger. It's a very important tool, yeah? So this week we're dealing with weasel medicine. Yeah, and when we think about weasel, you know, we oftentimes hear the phrase like, oh, I'm going to try to weasel, you know, my way out of this. You know, it's kind of this cunning, tricky medicine, all right? And it turns a lot of people off, which I think is unfortunate because it's absolutely crucial. I mean, all communication, everything, this exchange, this is all Mercury. You know, this is all weasel medicine. Weasel was the one that informed the Native Americans that the white man was approaching in their boats and their age was essentially done, yeah? Sometimes it's difficult to be the messenger. Sometimes the messages are pretty deep, you know, and unsettling. And we're receiving like a UPS truck full of messages this week. Yeah, there's just going to be so much information coming in. And that's why we really need to be calm, we need to slow down, we need to make sure that our emotions are married to our mind. That means if you receive a package and there's an emotional reaction, maybe allow those emotions to process before you open up the next package. And don't overly tune into the mind and ignore your emotions, because then what ends up happening is that we miss the deeper message. This full moon that's coming up next Tuesday is in Leo. And as we talked about, Leo is the hero, the subjective truth. It is our history. And this week with the Leo moon and this Mercury retrograde, we are learning an awful lot about our own history. And this history is deeply revealing. It is revealing to get in touch with our own past. And with this Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, you know, this can be a very deep past. This doesn't have to be the past that was yesterday. This doesn't have to be the past that was 10 years ago. Speaking of the holy matrimony of the mind and emotions, you know, so many people want to know about their past lives, and I don't think that you need to consult an astrologer or a psychic in order to know about those past lives. If you want to know about your deep past, your deep history that goes so much deeper than we're consciously aware of, and right now what we're doing is we're expanding that awareness. Yeah, that's what's really going on. But if you want to get in touch with that deeper past, your own story, your own individual truth, and the history that formed that truth, get in touch with your emotions. Yeah, it's like we see all these people that have these various fetishes, and what I mean by fetish is that is attraction to a thing. So people will have like a medieval fetish, or they're a fairy fetish. They, you know, they're really into these kind of fantastical stories and stuff. I wonder why. You're having a particular emotional reaction. Study your emotions. You want to know why you're having an emotional reaction? It's because there's a story underneath that emotion that goes very, very deep, yeah? Emotions are the messenger of the subconscious, yeah? The mind is like the messenger of the, you know, the conscious part of ourself, the, you know, awake and acting in the world and comparing and dividing and labeling. So really, they're both messengers. We can't shoot the messenger in either case. In fact, we need to really regard the messenger highly, irrelevant of what the message is being delivered is. It's not like, oh, my mind causes me to suffer, therefore I need to kill my mind. This is the old age approach. And when all those old enlightened beings were saying, yes, your suffering is the result of your ego and your mind, they were not saying, therefore, kill your ego and your mind. There needs to be an understanding of the ego and the mind in order to not suffer so much from them. You know, what we're talking about here is we are talking about pain. And there is pain that needs to be talked about. There are messages related to pain that need to be delivered because pain is in our history. And we have become wounded in our history. And that wounding and that pain can blossom into something incredibly medicinal and powerful and healing. so long as we appreciate and understand the messages of pain. And we understand what pain is, yeah. We don't say that we will get rid of our suffering, okay, through some kind of practice, through some kind of suppression of whatever, okay. By embracing your suffering, appreciating the story and the message of our pain and our suffering, that is transcending suffering. Yeah, if you try to get away from suffering, that's just going to make it so much worse, yeah. And this is a theme that's going through this week with Mars conjunct Chiron this weekend, okay? So my recommendation to all of us spiritual practitioners is, you know, if we're surrounding a person who's going through some kind of tragic thing, or there's a bunch of painful feelings, or there's a history that's being remembered that is painful, what is the best thing to do? And we're going to talk about why it is so necessary for us to embody the divine feminine principle in its most charitable, compassionate, forgiving essence, because this is what femininity is in its essence. It is compassion. That means forgiveness. Yeah, we're going to talk about forgiveness. But anyways, let's say someone's going through a tragic situation, you know, and it feels painful, and oh no, now we're suddenly in a situation where we're feeling pain. I don't want to feel pain because I think feeling pain is bad according to my old belief system. Therefore, I'm going to throw a spiritual one-liner at this person suffering. Oh yes, let me flip open my sacred text and la da 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 da. Therefore, you know, everything's God, everything's perfect, blah blah blah, you know, get over it. We don't have to feel this pain anymore. You know, let's not deal with that. This is not helpful at all. How do you want to actually show somebody your spiritual capacity? How do you know that you are spiritually capable? By sitting in pain, by confronting pain, by embracing pain. This is a testament of your faith and your spirituality, not the spiritual one-liners. Your capability to sit in pain and suffering with another person is a testament of your compassion. And better than throwing a spiritual one-liner at that person, if you can just sit there and silently breathe it in and feel it with them, you will help that person transmute that pain into healing without having to escape it. Yeah. And this is taking us to a very deep and beautiful point, which is the understanding that pain and suffering is tasty, it's beautiful, it is revealing the hero's quest and the hero's journey. All right, which even deeper can take us into the realization that although there is so much pain and suffering in this world, there are really no perpetrators. See, when you're throwing a spiritual one-liner at somebody, you're creating a cause and effect perpetrator, like, oh, this is the reason for your suffering, this is what went wrong, this is who hurt you, and this is to blame. And this is not the correct understanding if we are going to transcend into a period where we are living in compassion and all-embraciveness and warmth and intimacy with one another, yeah? Because this warmth, this intimacy, this compassion, this nurturance that is the divine feminine. When we speak of the divine feminine, we're talking about these principles, yeah? A lot of those things have been deeply suppressed and wounded by the patriarchy. They were not suppressed and wounded by divine masculinity. That would be blaming masculinity for the patriarchy. But that's not even understanding why the patriarchy happened. Why did the patriarchy happen? There's a reason even deeper than that that is not to blame somebody. Yeah, this is inevitably, at the end of the day, taking us into the realization that all is dance, all is music, all is bliss, including the things, the experiences, the feelings that seem unpleasant. Because there is a deeper story that is so beautiful, that beauty overpowers all the little bits of negativity and pain and suffering. That beauty is so overpowering that once it is tapped into, it overpowers and penetrates into every other facet of life. So let us get into our own story this week, yeah? The Mercury messenger, the weasel medicine, is coming at us with all of this abundance of intuitive thoughts. I mean, we've got a lot of aspects to Pallas Athena this week. That is this seeing, wisdom, making connections that were never before made, revelations, realizations. We have asteroid Vesta moving from Capricorn into Aquarius tomorrow. That's like where our focus is, and that focus has been on Capricorn. That's been about getting work done, making sure that we're secure at everything. Moving into Aquarius, it's about liberation. It's about humanitarianism. It's about the birthrights that we all possess as human beings and taking ownership of that. So there is a terrific amount of really brilliant, far out energy that is working for us, but it must be married to the subjective, the personal, the intimate, the emotional realm. All right? So Saturday we have Mars conjunct Chiron. This is the wounded masculine. And this can be revealing the history of the wounded masculine that we're going to talk about. On Sunday, Venus conjuncts Neptune. Venus moves into Pisces today. Venus is exalted in Pisces. She's even stronger. She's more powerful. Conjunct Neptune, it's like she's singing the song of unconditional love. And it is so important for her and ourselves, being human beings, meaning that we embody the divine feminine and masculine principle ourselves, irrelevant of our sexuality, of our gender. It has nothing to do with that. You as a human being, you are divine feminine, you are divine masculine in holy matrimony in order to be conceived. Yes? All right. So, Venus conjunct Neptune is this unconditional love, this forgiveness, and Mars conjunct Chiron is remembering the history of the wounded masculinity. And what I'm going to present is an image that will hopefully allow for this forgiveness and this understanding of our own history to happen in the most gentle way. That way we can better heal these parts of ourselves gently and with most consideration. All right. And this image that I'm talking about is many times when we hear the word divine masculine, this image comes to mind of the emperor upon the throne with the old man's beard and, you know, I am God, you know. When we look at a lot of these old portrayals of God, that's the image we see is this powerful, almighty, I'm in control of everything. I control all of you. I create the laws. I create the world. And then I just watch it all. And it's all my perfection. It's this kind of, you know. And the image I'm going to present is that this is not actually the divine feminine. Yeah, and actually these archetypes are so fundamental that there are different facets. There's different ways, there's different forms of looking at these very fundamental archetypes, all right? But what if we looked at the divine feminine as being an eternal youth? Yeah? The divine feminine is the sun. The sun impregnates the earth with life, yeah? Father, Son, Mother Earth, all right? But the sun is Leo. Leo is not an old man crone. Leo is the child, spontaneous, free, playful. From the perspective of the soul, everything happening here is play, even when we call it spiritual work from the perspective of our individual. You know, we say, oh, this is spiritual work. To the soul, everything is play. Even the most devastating things that happen is still play for the soul, inconceivable as it may be. All right? So the divine masculine is much more like a eternal youth than it is an old man. But have we been taught this? No. Have men been taught this? No. Men have been very, very wounded. Masculinity has been very, very wounded for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. You want to know why the patriarchy is so harsh and brittle in all the textbooks? And I'm saying like all the textbooks. You look at any ancient text, it's always men are superior to women. Men are more intelligent, women are more crazy. Why was the patriarchy so brittle and harsh and cold and so derogatory towards women? Because the men, the masculinity was already severely wounded at that point. And we were out of touch with our own inner youthfulness, which is the same as our inner innocence, you understand? If men are being raised, and we are being raised, and we have been raised by generation after generation after generation of wounded men. Wounded father taught son, who became a wounded father who taught son, that being a man is about being strong, brash, tuning out your emotions, because that makes you crazy, that makes you weak, and you've got to do work, yeah? We understand that men are still the protectors, you know, that's established. Women are in the cave, guarding the resources, you know, goddesses of abundances. Men stand on the outside of the cave with the spears and make sure no predators get in, yeah? We all get trained this way, and it's like, you know, this is really hard because men get cut off from their own divine feminine in this way. We get taught that to embody our own divine feminine principle, even to embody our own divine masculine principle in its real essence, is weakness. So we get trained to be cold and, harsh and all of these things. And all of us, this has happened to us, irrelevant of our gender. This is a part of our history because our history is connected to the collective history that has taken place here. And this has taken place here. We've all been severely wounded, all right? So this weekend with the moon in Cancer, Mars conjunct Chiron, from a mundane point of view, it's going to be a little hard to get a lot of stuff done because there's a lot of feels this weekend. And we're doing a lot of processing. And what we may be noticing with this Mercury retrograde is, we may fall back into some things. We may repeat some things that we don't like, things that we thought we got away from. And the whole point of doing this is to remind us of where we are coming from. This is to remind us of our past. And why do we need to look at the past? Because we need to forgive the past. We need to forgive everything that has happened to us, as well as everything that we've done to the world. We have been the perpetrator and the perpetrated. We have experienced this. We have experienced being wounded. We have experienced causing harm onto others because we have been wounded. All right? So, when we think of Mars and we think of like this masculine archetype that we've all been taught, it's like this understanding, oh yeah, women come from Venus, men come from Mars. It's like, that sucks. Women come from the planet of love, Mars come from the planet of war. Come on, that sucks. That's shallow. And that spear coming out of Mars is a phallic symbol, It's this kind of like beastly, powerful energy. Is this what it means to be a man? Yeah? It's tough to embody that. There is so much unconscious self-hate and guilt within men and the masculine energy because we really feel that we are this very beast-like, unemotional, harsh person because that's what, we've been made out to be. But this is not fundamentally what masculinity is. We need to understand that men are like children, yeah? And we can look at how these archetypes relate, and oftentimes the relation between the divine feminine and the divine masculine is the divine feminine is like the mother cradling the divine masculine, which is the child. This is a very important archetype for us to grasp. That way we can practice being children ourselves, which means that we can receive the nurturance of the universe, of the world, our mother. We can receive, we are allowed to see that because we are innocent. We are not guilty, we are not being punished. So we all have to practice being the child. And we all have to practice being the mother as well, seeing everybody else as the child. You want to know why that person went crazy and raped a bunch of people? Because they're severely wounded. You want to know why that person did some other really atrocious act, declared wars, killed people, maimed people, controlled people? You want to know why they did that? Because they were severely wounded. Yeah. They're just a lost child who never received the nurturance of their mother and feeling so cold, so damned, they can perform all of these atrocious things. If you did not feel so damned, you would not be capable of doing all those atrocious things. So here's the real wisdom of this. If we watch ourselves kind of go back into the past, we see our own atrociousness come out again and we start reviewing this stuff. How do we handle this? Do you beat the shit out of yourself? Do you punish yourself? All right. Let's talk about a really common masculinity thing that's going on these days. Speaking of men being disconnected from their nurturance, pornography. There's a lot of spiritual men who have been conditioned into pornography and now they feel really guilty about it. And let's say, you go back in time and you review pornography and it makes you feel all this stuff. It makes you feel like the rapist, like the perpetrator. You feel guilty, you feel shameful, and you know what you want to do? You want to beat the shit out of yourself. And that's not going to resolve this cycle of repetition until there is forgiveness, until there is an understanding of the total story of why this came to be. During the olden days, when men in their Viking boats used to go onto the shore and they would just, pillage and rape the whole village, why do you think they did that? It's because their lives were so decrepit and morbid and terrible that was the highlight of their life, was to be able to pillage and rape, because all the rest of their life, they were like gears in a machine, just workhorses that had no purpose, no nurturance, no warmth. So the best warmth that they could receive was through raping. That is terrible on one side, and it's not to say that we say rape is okay. But this is the whole love the sinner and not the sin thing. We have to understand why the patriarchy got so messed up and perverted as it did. It's because actually the divine masculinity is an eternal youth, and we need to recognize that part in ourselves so we can review our own history with open arms and not be just like, this is so terrible and disgusting. I never want to be that. I never want to be put in that position. We understand, okay, this is someone who's suffering, who is wounded. Atrocious acts do not happen unless there is some suffering and wounded child that is fundamentally at the root. Therefore, no suffering is going to be alleviated. There's not going to be an end of more atrocious acts unless we can learn to forgive others and ourselves. Yes? And this is the healing of the divine masculine principle that I think we can be experiencing this weekend as we are reminded of our deeper history and our deeper story. That way we can come into this full moon in Leo and fully embody the divine masculine, which is our activeness, our involvement in the world, what we are doing, what we are communicating. Yes, we are all messengers. We're all communicating. We're all experiencing, we're all playing, we're all dancing together. That is the divine masculine. It's not some old hard ass in a throne. It is the spontaneous, playful, dancing child. And that is what we are. In form, interacting with other people, uplifting other people. That way it's not work. Our work is our play, you know. It's not about shoving and suppressing away our emotions because there's so much to do. If we allowed ourselves to play and be free and be spontaneous and be innocent, there wouldn't be all of these emotions that are calling our attention only because they are reminding us of our history of cutting off love to ourselves and others. And if we can see pain and suffering as messages coming from our subconscious and our unconscious, reminding us of how we have potentially cut off ourselves from love, then we can understand that that pain is really mercy. It is a blessing. It is our divinity coming up from us to remind us of who we truly are. That way we can liberate ourselves from the prisons and the repeated experiences that we've been doing again and again and again. Yeah, so with the whole Mercury retrograde, and we think of like, oh, this is annoying having to repeat this, technical thing, having to reshoot a video. We think that's annoying? Imagine how many times we've repeated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime the unconscious parts of ourselves that we aren't even aware that we are repeating. If you want to end that level of repetition, having to do lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of the same thing in order to learn your own fundamental innocence, in order to love yourself, you best listen to your emotions. We best tap into the unconscious part of ourselves that is revealing the greater story. Because getting in touch with that deep story is going to lead us to being so much more invigorated, so much more powerful. We will see how truly capable and powerful we are, having gone through what we already have and coming out on the other side. And then we can maybe embrace a powerful mind and a powerful ego and say, you know what, these are incredible tools that I can use to heal the world and to change other people's lives. And then it's not so much a self-punishment type of thing. It's embrace yourself, love yourself, and share that love with the world. That is how we heal the divine masculine. And that is how we move out of the old age and the old paradigm into a paradigm that is focused upon man's inherent interconnectivity, intimacy, and warmth with one another. So we can take a look at your chart. We can see how this energy is affecting you, the energy of 2015, that is really getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and we are really pushing off, and we are moving in some brand new directions, And basically, it's like this stuff is going to keep up the pace until we arrive at our new destination. Yeah, so we best know where we are going. We best be conscious of the passage that we are on. And if we can be aware of that passage, if we can include that in our awareness, we can even harness this energy in such a way to allow ourselves and the rest of the world to blossom beautifully, So see and acknowledge and submerge yourself in the beauty of the story and share it with the entire world. So much love to you and all your beloveds. Namaste.